Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Linguistics for Language Learners. Today's episode we will introduce friction sounds. So we're looking at the consonant table at the top of the International Phonetic Alphabet page. And you can see there's one row in this table that's very popular, and those are the friction sounds. So starting with what we've already seen, we have the rows of the table are the different methods of making a closure in the mouth. And so the air comes out of the lungs and something interrupts it on its way, and that's how you produce a consonant. So the first and simplest way to make that closure is to have a total closure and then explode it open, and that's called a plosive. But another option is rather than having a total closure, you have an almost complete closure. So that when you breathe past it, instead of it exploding open, you get sort of a hissing sound as the air sort of becomes turbulent. The air creates friction as the air goes by, and that is what is called a fricative, from the word friction. So the first fricative sound we'll look at, it's close to what a P is, but in many languages, including English, we don't like to make a fricative with both lips. Instead, we use the lip and the tooth together. That's called labial dental, or lip and teeth. Now, here, there are no plosives even available for labial dental because it seems like it's quite difficult to make a total closure and sort of pop it open. You'd end up biting your lip if you try to make a very tight closure. So if you place your upper teeth on your lower lip and then breathe past it, you end up, of course, with the sound F. So, as in a word like find, going with verbs today. Now, for the letter T, for the plosive there, we do have a fricative available. It's a very popular letter. And just like with T, you place your tongue against the gum behind your top front teeth. But instead of making it tight, like a tight closure, you instead make a little bit of a looser closure or just a little bit of space available. So when you breathe past it, you get that hissing sound of the letter S, as in C. Now, like I said, fricatives are very popular. It's easy to make many different sounds with them. And you have options where it's not really possible to make a plosive, but we can make that kind of friction sound. So there's another sound which is made close to an S, but instead we make it with our teeth. And that's called dental, because the tongue is touching our top front teeth. Sometimes it can be made with the tongue between the teeth, but typically touching the top front teeth. So dental, of course, a teeth sound. And so if you place your tongue, tip of your tongue against your top front teeth, and breathe past it, you get the sound th, as in think. Now here's the first time that we have to use a letter that is not a standard English letter. Because in English, we typically write this with TH. But in the International Phonetic Alphabet, every sound gets one letter. So for this, we borrow the Greek letter theta. In Greek, it has that sound. Now, this is a sound that if you come from an English background, this is very normal, just an ordinary sound, part of many common words. But if you look at it from the global perspective of all the different languages, this is actually quite a rare and strange sound. So most languages do not have this th sound, and it can be very difficult for English learners. And you may have heard that when a speaker cannot produce a sound, they attempt to produce a closer sound. So T and S are common substitutes that English learners will use to say this sound until they learn it. It's like tink or sink. Because T and S, almost every language in the world has T and S, but only a select few have this theta sound. So as far as English sounds go, this is one of the weirder ones. Now there's another fricative sound that's also close to S. And for this one, we just move the tongue further back, a little bit behind the S. So instead of touching the gum, we touch behind the gum. And this is called post-alveolar, or after the alveolar, behind the gum. So if you just kind of place your tongue like you're making an S, like tongue against the gum above your top front teeth, and just kind of move the tongue back a little bit. Kind of bunch up your tongue, pulling it back a bit from the S, and that's where you get the sh sound, like sh. And of course, in English, we typically write this with SH, but because it needs to be a single letter, the IPA, the phonetic alphabet, uses this stretched out S to represent the sound of sh, as in a word like show. So you can see a lot of space over here on the right of the table. And there's many other sounds that other languages use, but English doesn't use those sounds. There's only one more sound, one more fricative sound that English uses, and you have to go all the way back to the right end of the table. You may have noticed that the left end of the table starts with lips, and then it's moving back as you go to the right. So the right end of the table is as far back as you can go. And that's into what's called the glottis, which is another word for the vocal cords, which you can also simply call the throat. Right in the vocal cords where your voice is made. If you make a little bit of a, it's hard to imagine actually making the closure because we don't really have that kind of direct control over closing our vocal cords the same way that we can move our tongue or lip and teeth. But if you kind of make a little bit of that rough breath, that kind of like friction right in the vocal cords, and of course we end up with the sound H, as in a word like help. And so those are the fricatives. In the next lesson, we will look at a way to double these sounds, because you may have noticed that there are some sounds missing here, and so next time we will double them up. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.